What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Bloodborne, and in this video we're going to do something a little bit different than I normally do. I'm going to go over a build for PvP on the champion. Now before we get started, make sure to click the subscribe button so you get all those updates in the future. And while you're at it, head on over to the Twitch channel after the video and follow over there so you can catch me live and ask questions there too. Alright, let's get into this. Now, for those of you guys out there that are very familiar with the class and you know all the inner workings of it and whatnot, here's the trait tree panel so you can see what build I'm doing. And if you don't care about any of the explanations beyond that, here you go. And for the rest of you, continue on watching and we'll cover all of these in detail. Now, the first thing we're going to take a look at is our class traits. Now, this build is built off of the red line or berserker line. So after you've selected red line, the first trait that you're going to want to put 5 points into is critical chance increase. This one's pretty straightforward as it's just giving you plus 5% melee crit chance. The next one we're going to add in is brutal strikes. This is a great option because it only requires 1 point and it's giving you a nice heavy hitting skill that gives you 3 attacks. And these 3 attacks are also affected by deep strikes later on down in the line, giving each the ability to start a bleed on a crit. Next up in this build, we're going to put all 5 points into wild swings. This is going to increase the wild attack damage by 25%, and it has a chance to proc an additional 5% crit chance for 10 seconds. So this particular one you could go either way with. I prefer to have it in there because I do like to have as much crit chance as I can. Now you may go the other way and opt out of this one to put those other points in somewhere else down in the build, and that's okay too. Next up we have vicious strikes. Now put all 5 ranks into this one. That is going to give you 10% strike skill crit chance. So anytime that we can give ourselves more damage or more crit chance, not rating, I think that's a really good thing to take. Also, you need to have 5 points in a particular line to move to the next line, so that's a really good one to take. Another must-have in my opinion is going to be battle reflexes. This is something you're going to put 5 ranks into, and this is going to decrease your attack duration by 10%. Anytime that you can reduce your attack duration, that is a great thing. Whether it be PvP or PvE, there are so many things out there that can increase your attack duration, and anything that you can counter that with or just make your overall attack speed faster is a good thing, especially on a damage class. Now, the next one is where it gets a little different. Hamstring, or hamstrung in this case, is not something that you're going to find in a lot of builds other than PvP. If you're going to use this virtue, or this trait I should say, you're going to want to put all 5 ranks in. And the reason behind that is when you have max rank, it will actually cause a knockdown of 2.2 seconds on the enemy. So you're giving yourself some additional CC out there, which is very, very helpful. Next up, we're going to see deadly strikes. Again, put all 5 points into deadly strikes. This is going to increase your critical damage of all your strike skills. If you look back at vicious strikes, we have the increased strike skill chance, and now we are adding in the strike skill critical damage by 25%. Next up, we have strong armed swings. Again, this is one that we're going to put all 5 points into. Every hit on strike skills deals additional damage, so we're getting another 10% damage for all of our strike skills. Next up, we're going to have ferocious strikes. Now, ferocious strikes is a very heavy hitting skill, and any of the skills that have multiple attacks, whether it be ferocious strikes, brutal strikes, anything like that, again, this is another skill that can be sped up with the use of clobber or true heroics, those instant cast skills that can cut the animation to move on to the next skill. So you can use those to really bust out some damage with these longer animation skills. And this is another skill that will be modified by the next trait that we're going to look at, deep strikes. Deep strikes is very important, and there's actually a little hidden trick with deep strike that is tied into your legendary items, and we'll go over that here in just a second. So strike skills now apply a bleed on critical hit. So any of your strike skills, whether it be swift strike, wild attack, dev strike, ferocious strikes, anything like that, they all have a chance to apply the bleed. Deep strikes can be ranked up to give yourself an additional 40% deep strikes bleed damage, which I highly recommend you take all 3 points in this one as well. The next up in our list is controlled burn, giving yourself that extra 15% melee damage and your attack speed by 5% for 30 seconds, and giving yourself the increased fervor pip generation for 30 seconds. Has a 1.5 minute cooldown, so it's up fairly often for you. Very, very good to have in your red line. Really, in any build, you should be able to get down to controlled burn, and it's worth it as a champion. Next up is another one of these traits that you don't normally see used in PvE setups, and it really is helpful for PvP. But athletic, you want all 3 points into it because it is very similar to a Guardian's brutal charge in that your next attack will cause a stun. Now the Guardian one is different because it causes a knockdown, and there is no time window in which that has to be used. The champion one does need to be used within a 15-second window, or you lose the stun effect of it. Now where this comes in really handy is in something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the blue line virtues that we have. Next up is going to be Killing Spree. Killing Spree is another one of those ones where it is kind of, if you want to use it, go ahead and use it. It's not something you have to. You may need to spend enough points to get down to your capstones, so it's a good spot to use it there. I would still recommend putting all 3 ranks into it because on every kill, it is going to restore 10% of your maximum morale. So it does have to be a killing blow, and that is something to keep in mind. Next up, we're going to be looking at Weapon Master. Now, Weapon Master is kind of goofy right now because two-handed weapons really just aren't that great. And unless you're very proficient with weapon swapping, it's kind of there. It's going to give you a flat 6% damage and 3% parry if you're dual wielding like I am. If you are using a two-hander in those weapon swap situations, you are going to get that plus 15% crit damage. So that is something to consider as well. And lastly, in the red line, we are going to be looking at Champion's Duel. Champion's Duel is great in PvP because it does give you a ranged slow, and it also is going to be buffing your melee damage every few seconds for 30 seconds. So this is a great one out in the moors, especially if you have a warg that's trying to get away from you really quickly. You can slow them down a little bit. Also, this is going to affect if you use sprint and then use Champion's Duel. This will actually be a ranged slow stun, so if they pot out of one of them, they are still going to be affected by the other one. Next up, we're going to talk about the 2 blue line traits that we have in here. The first one is very simply Stalwart Blade. This is going to give you 9,500 additional vitality, so it's going to give you a nice big chunk of health out there, plus 5% parry. That's okay. You know, if you're mixing that in there with your Weapon Master plus 3% chance to parry, it's an extra avoidance. It's never a bad thing to have. Not something you want to go out of your way to spec into, but it's just there. It is a bonus for you. I do take Horn of Champions in this build for 2 very, very specific reasons. The first reason is that it is going to debuff at a minimum 6 targets for 20% damage for 10 seconds. Now, where this comes in handy also is if you are using the athletic buff from Berserker. So if you hit sprint and then you hit Horn of Champions, you're going to hit 6 targets in an 8-meter radius. They are all going to be debuffed for 20%, minus 20% damage, and any of them that do not have an immunity up are going to be stunned. That range is also 30 meters, so it allows you to close in on the target very quick. So if you have a black arrow out there, not only are they going to be debuffed for their damage, but you're going to get some closing speed on them pretty quickly because you have sprint active, they are stunned, and they are debuffed for damage. This is a great utility in the moors. All right, so let's go over the yellow line traits in this build. The first one up is going to be Battle Frenzy. Now, Battle Frenzy is kind of a no-brainer. It's going to give you 6,300 physical mastery for 12 seconds. The cooldown's only 10 seconds, so Battle Frenzy, your physical mastery should always be up, and you should always be generating that extra fervor. Tied in with that, we are going to be looking at Ardent Rage. That is going to reduce that cooldown by 30 seconds, so it makes Battle Frenzy available every 10 seconds. It's going to give you the additional fervor pips, and it's going to give you the +3 fervor when you initially hit it. So Battle Frenzy gives you full fervor right out of the gate. Now, the last several points that we have, really I'm putting that into unlocking Raging Blade and giving myself the 60% Raging Blade damage bonus. And then the last points that I have available to me, I'm just putting into Blade Wall, just in the event that I have some AoE situations I want to do a little bit more damage there. Now, like I said, this is how this build is set up for me. This may vary for you. You may see some things in your playstyle that you want to have something different, and that's totally cool. Let me know what you guys are doing with that stuff in the comments below. The next thing we need to talk about in this build is our virtue traits. Now, this is going to be short and sweet. Really, most of my builds are this way, that I use tactical mitigation builds. So we have compassion, honor, tolerance, innocence, and fidelity. This is a lot of mitigation across all of those. Some extra vitality, a little extra armor here and there, some crit defense, and some resistance. These are all important in the Moors because of what's happening out there is fell rot and orccraft damage, so the physical mitigation is very important. The higher you push and overcap your physical mitigation, the higher basically the mitigation from the creeps will go, so you can stay alive longer. So I highly recommend using those. If you go glass cannon out in the Moors, it will not end well. You will die very, very quickly, especially if you are going solo and don't have any heals. You need something to fortify yourself a little bit, so I would recommend that you use some of those mitigations. Now, the last thing we want to talk about here are our legendaries and what we're going to be using for PvP. Now, for me right now, I am using my redline weapon. As you saw, that build is predominantly redline, so I'm going to be using that primarily because of our rend bleed damage. Now, I know some of you are going to immediately say, but you don't have rend in redline. Now, this is the trick I was talking about before. Rend bleed damage actually affects deep strikes. So any of the bleeds that you get from deep strikes are actually affected by rend bleed damage. So that's why I have that on my redline weapon. The rest of the legacies on this are pretty straightforward for a regular redline build. And lastly, on the rune is actually the one I use in 95% of the situations that I'm in. It's pretty well balanced. There might be one thing that you would change here or there, but these are also the ones that I've used in previous videos with Minas Morgul. So nothing really has changed here, minus I think the very last legacy here with Bladeline AoE power cost, because it does add the 13% AoE skill critical damage, which is nice to have. I don't believe I had that in a previous video. So to sum this up, basically the idea behind this build is to have a lot of additional utility through stuns, knockdowns, and things like that, while giving yourself some additional survivability, speed, and attack duration buffs. And I think it's a lot of fun to use. It's been working out pretty well. I think I've surprised a few wargs recently, and it's been kind of fun to watch what happens with that. Usually there's a few more wargs that attack me after the first one after it happens, so it's been good fun out in the moors. So let me know what you guys think of the build, and I will try to get out some more build videos for some of the other specs that I have, and let me know what you guys like and dislike in the comments. Let me know what you guys do differently, or if there's something I missed that I should be doing. Feel free to let me know, and I hope to catch all of you guys in the live streams. Just as a reminder, I do stream on Twitch on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays starting at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and I hope to see you guys in there very, very soon.